The door opened with a soft groan, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. It smelled of earth and dampness, and the temperature dropped several degrees as she stepped forward. She hesitated, every instinct telling her to turn back, but something compelled her to go on. The stairs creaked as she descended, the oppressive silence pressing in on her from all sides. At the bottom, she found herself in what seemed like a basement. The air was thick with the scent of rot, and faint, indistinct sounds reverberated off the stone walls, as if something were moving just out of sight. She turned on the flashlight she had brought, the beam cutting through the shadows, revealing an array of old shelves stacked with dusty jars and boxes. In the parlor, dust particles floated lazily in the air, and the broken furniture, draped in moth-eaten sheets, gave the room a mournful, abandoned air. The paintings on the walls were faded, their colors dulled by years of exposure to the elements. Yet, one thing stood out: a large portrait at the end of the hall, of a woman who seemed to stare directly at Mary, with eyes that gleamed with something unnatural. The woman's lips were curled into a faint, knowing smile, and her expression, troubled but somehow calm, sent a chill crawling up Mary's spine. She tried to shake off the feeling, but her gaze was drawn back to the portrait as if it were pulling her in. With trembling hands, she reached up to touch the cold glass, her fingers brushing lightly against its surface. The air seemed to thicken, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw the woman's eyes blink. The air felt thick as Mary stepped out of her car, the gravel driveway crunching beneath her boots. The mansion before her loomed like a forgotten relic of the past, its dark windows reflecting the overcast sky, the weathered stone facade barely holding together after years of neglect. The house had been abandoned for decades, but now, after all these years, it had become hers, if only for a while. A cousin's will, an inheritance she hadn't asked for, had brought her here. She had only ever heard rumors about the place, whispers that it was haunted, but Mary wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. She wasn't even sure why she'd come to see it. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe a deep, unshakable need to escape the suffocating life she had been living. As she made her way toward the grand wooden doors, a sharp gust of wind made her shiver, and she pulled her coat tighter around her body. She didn't know what she expected, but it certainly wasn't the strange, unsettling sensation that settled over her as soon as she stepped into the dimly lit foyer. Her attention was drawn to one particular shelf at the far end of the room. Something on it gleamed in the dim light, and as she stepped closer, she realized it was a small, intricately carved box. It looked out of place among the clutter, its surface untouched by time or dust. Mary's heart raced as she reached for it, the moment feeling almost too important to ignore. She could almost feel the weight of 1,000 eyes on her as her fingers brushed the cool wood. The second she lifted the box from the shelf, a loud bang sounded from somewhere above, making her drop the box in shock. It landed with a soft thud on the floor, and Mary quickly bent down to retrieve it, her hands trembling. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach, a primal fear clawing its way up from within. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from the staircase. Someone, or something, was coming down. Her pulse quickened as she spun around, but no one was there. The basement was empty, the darkness now feeling more oppressive than ever. She turned back to the box, but before she could pick it up, a faint whisper seemed to brush against her ear. "Leave now." The whisper sent a wave of terror through her, and she ran back toward the stairs, the sound of footsteps growing louder behind her. Each step felt like an eternity as she hurried up the staircase, her breath shallow, her pulse erratic. As she reached the top, she whipped around, half expecting to see someone, or something, standing just behind her. But the hallway was empty, the air still. The house, however, seemed to have changed. The shadows felt deeper, the silence more complete. "Help me," the voice breathed, and the temperature in the hallway plummeted. The whisper echoed in her mind, urging her to leave. But Mary wasn't sure she could. Something in her gut told her that this place had claimed her, that the house was now watching her, waiting for her next move. The walls, the floors, the rooms, they all felt like they were alive, shifting in subtle ways that she couldn't fully understand. And the portrait of the woman, her eyes still watching from the far wall, no longer seemed as distant as it had before. It felt like an invitation, a warning. Shaking her head, Mary turned away, but the unease gnawed at her. Every step she took seemed to echo throughout the empty halls, a constant reminder of the silence that enveloped the mansion. She wandered from room to room, taking in the decay, until she found herself standing at the base of a grand staircase. The wood creaked ominously underfoot as she ascended, each step taking her deeper into the heart of the house. The upper floors were even colder, the air laced with the distinct feeling of abandonment. The rooms were smaller here, each one holding nothing but a few old trunks and decaying furniture. One room, however, caught her attention. A small, unassuming door tucked away in the corner. Without thinking, she walked toward it, the handle cold against her palm as she turned it. As night began to fall, Mary sat in one of the upstairs rooms, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't seeing, something just beneath the surface of the house's decaying walls. The sound of creaking wood echoed throughout the hallway outside her door, but when she opened it, the hallway was empty. She turned to go back to her room, but as she did, something caught her eye, a figure standing in the darkness at the end of the hall. It was the woman from the portrait, her silhouette faint but unmistakable. Mary froze, her heart thundering in her chest. The woman's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came, only the faint sound of a whisper, this time clearer than before. Mary's legs shook as she took a step back. What was happening? What had she unearthed? And why was the woman from the portrait now here, in the flesh, or what appeared to be the flesh? Was this a trick of the light, her mind playing games on her? Or had she awakened something she wasn't meant to? Suddenly, the house seemed to groan, as if waking from a long slumber, and the walls closed in around her, the whispers growing louder, drowning out everything else. The darkness seemed to move, alive with a force she couldn't comprehend. A cold hand brushed against her shoulder and she screamed, spinning around, but there was no one there. Just the oppressive silence of the house, suffocating her, pulling her deeper into its web. The door slammed shut behind her, and she was trapped. The door slammed shut behind her, and she was trapped. This is just the beginning of a longer tale. Let me know if you want me to continue or explore specific aspects of the story further. The room is dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of decay. A lone figure stands in the center, trembling as the sound of creaking floorboards echoes through the house. The wind howls outside, but the figure can't tear their eyes away from the shadowy corner of the room. A cold breath brushes against their neck, sending shivers down their spine. They turn, heart pounding, but the corner is empty. They take a step forward, the floor groaning under their weight. A whisper, faint but unmistakable, fills the silence. "Get out." The voice is raspy, filled with malice. The figure freezes. The whisper grows louder, closer. "Leave this place." Panic rises, but before they can move, the door slams shut with a deafening crash. The figure spins around, eyes wide with fear. The walls seem to close in, the air thickening. The whispering intensifies, now a chorus of voices, all saying the same thing: "You should never have come here." The floor beneath their feet shifts, the wood warping as though alive. Suddenly, something sharp grabs their ankle, dragging them toward the center of the room. The figure screams, but their voice is swallowed by the walls. The lights flicker, casting shadows that dance like living things. In the distance, the faint sound of something dragging itself along the floor grows louder. The figure struggles, but the grip tightens. "No!" they cry, but it's too late. From the darkness, a grotesque figure emerges, its face twisted in a permanent grin, eyes hollow. It reaches out, fingers long and gnarled. The figure tries to pull free, but the more they fight, the more they're pulled in. The last thing they see is the thing's face looming over them, a single whisper escaping its lips. "Welcome home." The room goes dark.